Never miss a live stream. The What's On guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
This is a new voice for a new Scotland.
We know you're busy people, so most of our shows are also on demand on our Scottish Independence podcast channel, available wherever you get your podcasts. You'll see what a great variety of shows we have. There's something for everyone. Our newest on-demand platform is IndyLive Radio's YouTube channel. We have set up playlists for our most popular shows and current topics, currency, disc parties. New content is added almost daily, so subscribe and you won't miss anything. Join us. Thanks for listening. IndyLive Radio.
It's not acceptable to say we just keep on trying and we have another mandate and we have another mandate, we keep on trying. You've got to make a political judgment that it's not going to work and say, well, in that case, we have either got to admit that we're not going to go for independence. And this is where I think the government has not been honest with people. That is, I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just saying that it is at least a possibility. If we hone in totally on Section 30, we could not get a referendum at all under Section 30. And therefore, that to me means that you've got to find another way.
But I don't think anybody who's gone over to yes now is really for moving, because I think they can see clear as day what things look like. And I always felt that during the independence referendum that it would take a no vote in order for a lot of Scots to realise the consequences of voting no. They would have to see what happens when they vote no in order to realise what a mistake it was.
And to me, that's the clear blue water between staying in the UK and going for independence. It's clear, regardless of what Boris Johnson said the other day, that they will want to go back to business as usual, where the ultra-rich are the ones who gain from everything. Mm. We don't want to be part of that. We want the chance to actually build a fairer country.
It's the Brexit stuff for me, the nepotism stuff for me, breaking international law stuff for me, the ERG hijacking UK democracy stuff for me, education is a luxury stuff for me, £9,000 tuition a year stuff for me, it's the NHS on the table for a US trade deal stuff for me, demonising the working classes stuff for me, refusing starving children free school meals stuff for me, it's Boris calling Muslim women letterboxes stuff for me, his pickaninnies comments stuff for me, his bum boys comments stuff for me, his Scotland is a verminous race comments stuff for me, the UK internal market bill ripping up the devolution settlement stuff for me, devolved legislators being ignored during Brexit stuff for me, a lack of UK leadership during COVID stuff for me, nuclear weapons being in Scotland stuff for me, a decade of Tory governments Scotland didn't elect stuff for me, it's a weak left opposition in England stuff for me, attempting to frame independence as anti-English bigotry stuff for me, it's trying to ban anti-capitalist references in schools stuff for me, it's England-centric lefties painting SNP as a protest vote even though Scottish Labour is spineless stuff for me, it's the UK for me.
film. You can watch this again. You can be part of it. It's Independence Live. Yeah. A few people asked about YouTube. It'll be YouTube/Independence Live. That's where you'll find the footage.
Hello everyone, John Drummond here, host of the TNT Show every Wednesday at 7 p.m. We have another great guest coming up this week. You don't want to miss Suzanne McLaughlin. She'll be talking about journalism, about feminism, about standing as an SNP candidate, and much, much more besides. Join us, 7 p.m. Wednesday. See you then.
Here we are, it's the Yukon Bridge where we started the first 500 miles. In front of that beast there. This is where it all started. We're now in day 4 and we're heading towards Portree. We'll see he's on the road. Sign the covenant. Long walk to freedom. Talk to you later.
Hi there, I'm Cliff.
And I'm Russ.
And we're from the Veterans for Scottish Independence 2.0 group. And we're just invading your privacy today to let you know that we will be very shortly pushing a programme out on live stream to do with the veterans, their needs as it will be during an independent campaign. The next independence campaign, and indeed in an independent Scotland.
So get yourself in gear, come and join us, pull up a sandbag.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Wherever you stand, get the fresh view of what's happening in Scotland with iScot. Celebrate everything about our country with intelligent, in-depth insight from lifestyle, culture to puzzles, and all the opinions you'll need. Whether it's digital or by post, subscribe now to iScot.
Good evening, people. Welcome to ceòl Heids with Mike Fennick and myself. And today we have David Henry, who's going to be standing for the National Secretary of the SNP next week. And he's going to tell us a bit about why you should vote for him in this broadcast. Over to you, Mike.
Well, thanks for inviting me on.
David. We had a chat beforehand and we identified that you and I share certain characteristics which we'll deal with when we start talking. But the thing I wanted to start off with is very simply, I'm not a member of the SNP. I've never been a member of any political party and I don't intend to become a member of any political party. So I'm going to try and deal with some of the things that I would like to bring up with you with that qualification in mind, because there's a lot of the inner goings. I'll give you an easy example. When I knew we were going to have this discussion, I went looking for the SNP constitution, which would appeal to you, right?
Yes, 180 odd pages.
I could not find it, right? I looked here, I could find snippets of it, I could find bits and pieces elsewhere, but to actually understand the makeup and how the SNP is meant to be run, I couldn't find that anywhere. And that jaundice in my part, if you like, it's why I'm not a member of a political party, because unless you understand fully what that party is committed to and how it tends to go about doing it, you can't join. It doesn't matter that you join and then have disagreements. That's part of politics. But if you don't actually fully understand what the party is and how it's meant to be run, that's a lot of stuff that I think we're going to come on to in this discussion. But I just want to qualify it that if I say anything, it's as a non-member of any political party. So it's not pro-SNP or anti-SNP. It's just I'm not a political person in that respect. I don't join parties for that reason.
Sorry. We do have something, we have more than a couple of things in common. I had never been a member of any political party until the day after the referendum in 2014. And I had never voted for the SNP before either. And I only did so when the news came out. I remember it specifically, it was 2:30 in the afternoon on the 19th of September. And I had the news on, and Alex Salmon announced he was stepping down and resigning. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks that everything I'd put my heart and soul into, believing in Scottish independence, and that I'd come to that through a journey of about 6 months. The very first thing I did, so I hadn't really. The strange thing is, I've got an uncle down in Peebles, and he's in his 70s now. He's retired, and he had asked me at that Christmas. We'd had quite a few drinks, and he said, "I want an answer from you." I thought, what? This is about 2 a.m. or something. We were already, by that time, we were on the port. So we drunk several bottles of wine. Now we were on the port, which was deadly, absolutely deadly. Anyway, I sat there, so what's the question then? And he goes, right, next year, the referendum, how are you going to vote? I hadn't actually thought about it. And I said, well, on 2 conditions. No, he says, no conditions. How are you going to vote? I went, you've asked me a question, so here's my answer. On 2 conditions. 1, it makes economic sense to do. And do you know what? I can't remember what the second one was. And it goes, and whatever it was. So it was 1 was the economics of it. And I can't remember what the second thing was. And I said, and if they're both come up yes, then my answer will be yes. And he didn't like that answer because I hadn't given him the answer he wanted, a direct answer. And then within a month, I got a thing through the door. Tell a lie, it was 3 months, it was March. Horrible night in Edinburgh. It was bucketing with rain, and a fire came through my door saying Elaine C. Smith and Jim Sillars, Yes Pentlands, was having a public meeting in Wester Hailes in their education centre, a sort of 200-seater hall. So I went up there, half expecting it to be empty because the weather was so bad, and it was mobbed, absolutely overflowing. I actually couldn't believe it. I'd never been to any public meeting like that ever before. And I sat and listened to all these people, and I thought Elaine C. Smith was an incredible speaker. And in fact, she could sell me anything, I think. Yeah, very, very much just an all-round great human being, easy to talk to. She was brilliant. Jim Sillars, not quite the same reaction to him. I sat and listened to what he had to say. I was quite impressed with his enthusiasm, considering his age. He's about 70 years old. But I do remember thinking, after listening to Jim Sillars sort of talk, God, I hope he's not running the country because everything will be nationalised. And I thought, however, my overall impression was pretty positive, but I hadn't made a decision at that point. I sat and listened to it. There was a lot of unknowns at the time in March 2014. And then I do remember the exact time when I made my decision. And it was in May 2014. I heard through the grapevine there was another public meeting nearby. This was at Edinburgh University, I think, or Heriot Watt University, Craiglock at Edinburgh. And it was the one and only Deputy First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, basically answering questions. So I gets up there and sat down quite near the back of this theatre, quite high up. I went there because I've done television production in the past. So I went to see if she had an earpiece in. I thought, is she really the Does she really know what she's talking about? Or is somebody, and that's happened on television, where you get news readers and that, and they look like these presenters, they look fantastic, they sound fantastic. Yeah, but it's not their words. They're reading them on a screen, but you don't know it because they're very good at it. So I went there to see if she was real. Did she really know what she was talking about? And I got up one question, and right near the very end, there was this little old lady with long grey hair, very thin, looked quite frail, quite several below me. And I remember looking down, thinking, and we should all learn this lesson. And I mean, I never do, but anyway, I'm looking at her, thinking, I wonder what she's going to ask, because we'd had all these other people asking all sorts of stupid questions. Some not so stupid, but others that were clear plans. You know, oh, what currency are you going to use? And what if they've said you can't use it? And I'm sitting there thinking, well, hello, it's a floated currency. How are you going to stop another country using it? What, are you going to make it like North Korea? I mean, this is just nonsense. But anyway, that had gone on. So there's me sitting there thinking, what is this woman going to ask? It was about question number 37 out of about 40 questions. So it was quite late on. And they finally pick her, because they've clearly been avoiding her, I think. Anyway, they finally pick her. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, what's she going to ask them? And she goes, the Vienna Convention states that the member state that breaks away, that breaks up, loses all benefits from the agreements that it's signed into. Does this mean the UK is going to be leaving the EU, not Scotland, on its own? And I'm sat there gobsmacked. I'm not kidding. I thought, what the hell? Anyway, I scribbled that down. Vienna Convention. I don't know that one, but I thought, she's not going to know the answer to this. This is to Nicola Sturgeon. And of course, then Nicola comes back to that question and says, well, I'm 40 odd years old now, and I'm lucky because I had free education. Right? I remember her answer quite well. She goes, you're quite right. The UK, the Vienna Convention does indeed state that, but the UK isn't a signatory to that section. And that's when I went, oh, Christ, she does know the answer to it. Right, okay. I'm going to jump off the cliff. You've won me over. That's it. Okay, you know the answer to that. That's enough for me to know this isn't some harebrained scheme. I'll take the risk. I don't know what's coming afterwards, but I'll take the risk. And that was the moment that I decided to support Yes. And within that summer, I got involved with delivering leaflets. I went to some meetings and all that. But it was all totally new. I had no plans whatsoever in joining the party. Didn't really care what the SNP stand for, to be honest. I used to vote Labour. I used to think that the SNP was full of anti-English people, because that was a view that had been given to me, which, being my mother's born in England, even though she spent all her adult life here. Oh, by the way, she joined the SNP a few years ago. When she used to, I remember after the referendum, speaking to her mother about it, she goes, oh, that's terrible. That Alex Salmond's abandoned all those people that supported him. I thought, you hate him. This was just media spin being repeated back to me, you know. And I'm thinking, you don't even like him. You told me you don't like him. And then I told her, well, believe it or not, I've joined the SNP. And there was this long silence. What? I went, yeah. And goes, do you really think I'd join a party that's full of racists and bigots? Because I wouldn't. That's not the sort of person I am. I would never have done that. Oh. And then she slowly started to come round. And that was the weird thing. She came to this decision herself. And she joined.
I think let's bring us up to date with the conference that's going to take place. I know Dave can get quite passionate about this. I put my qualification in earlier because I'm fairly dispassionate, but I think it's going to be an interesting conference. Dave, over to you.
Well, I've been a member of the SNP twice. I first joined 11 years ago when the Scottish government came up to Skye where I was working at the time, and I met Alex Salmon and Kenny McCaskill, and Nicola Sturgeon wasn't there that day, and was studiously avoided answering one of these questions by John Swinney in the questions and answers thing, for which time I developed a pathological hatred for the man. But I joined the SNP. I was a member for a while. Then I went abroad and came back in 2012, so that we would get 2 votes for yes. I'd spent almost 25 years in Belgium, like over the period. So, but I came back, basically I had the 2 votes to yes in the 2014 referendum because they wouldn't let us vote living abroad. I then rejoined the party 3 years ago, and actually quit the party because of an argument I had with Joanna Cherry, believe it or not, who I'm a big supporter of, but I had a big argument with her one night, a Catalan thing, and it wasn't actually her fault. It was the person who was running the meeting wouldn't give me a right to respond after she'd given her answer. So I stormed out in a huff. But basically, I've been following everything that's been going on. We all know what's been going on. We all know how long it's been going on, and the whole situation where how Joanna was stopped. But by the people who stopped it, given the fact that it all came about from a slate last year that was put about at the conference in Aberdeen. Alan Smith had a little bit of a blowout in the National last week about it, that he thought that had gone over the line, and yet now there are 2 slates going around, one by the Common Bill, one by the women's rights people, and Denise Finley's doing an amazing job in collating both of them, and I believe your name's on both.
Oh, is it? I wasn't aware of that. This is news to me. I mean, it's you know what I think. I think it's interesting that we need to effectively stay focused on solving some of the issues.
Yes.
I've said it before, and it's absolutely true. While I've been extremely active campaigner and activist, I paid very little attention to what the NEC was, or what it did, or what its function was, and probably, like many in the party, didn't pay much attention to the constitution after it was revised in 2018. Funny enough, I made a speech against it, a direct negative, which I was sort of talked into that. It should have been a point of order, because I spotted in 2018 conference that in our agenda document, it referred to this constitution changes and that they were asking us to vote for it. And I looked at it and thought, but it says here, reference 3.86, I think it was. So I'm looking up 3.86 and I thought, this can't be right. This says the money's coming from our branches, £3,500 levy for people who are elected. What had happened is that someone had obviously changed one document and not updated the other one. So I raised this as a question. I got up on the stage, bloody nerve-wracking doing that in front of thousands of people, especially when you're going against the majority who all want you just to shut up and let's vote for it and get on. And there's me saying, but this doesn't make any sense. What exactly are we voting for? You know, I mean, if there's an error here. Now, it got sort of, anyway, I didn't win that particular argument, but it turns out I was right. It was an error, and they hadn't updated the agenda. And the agenda, so it's always about the detail. And the problem there is, if you don't have it correct, and that's been voted on and passed, then someone could use that for a different purpose completely, and before you know it, you've changed the constitution with an error in it. So attention to detail when it comes to, if you like, legalistic documents is really important. I'm not going to comment on what I think has happened with the NEC thing, except to say that what I've proposed in my transparency resolution, which has been widely shared, and I got quite a bit of support, I identified a number of small changes. They're not radical changes, not really, and it would prevent such things of a small clique of some sort forming in the future, because I think it's no good complaining about what's happened in the past, but we can learn from it to try and stop it from happening again. I didn't even notice that there was a slate being put forward. I never noticed. I voted for a number of people, but I didn't vote for every category because you just don't know who half the people are. You don't know what they stand for. And really, it's the people that you meet when you're at conference and then you get a flyer shoved in your hand and you look at it and go, all right, okay. And that's if you remember to vote, because when you're at these conferences, it can be all-encompassing and you forget, oh shit, there was an online vote. I forgot, and it's closed. So I don't blame others for, if you like, the way it's turned out. But what we can do is make sure it doesn't happen again. And we can make the party a bit more transparent, and we can make it more accountable to its membership. And after all, I think the fundamental thing here to remember is that it's the members that own the party. It's not Alex Salmond, it's not Nicola Sturgeon, it's not whoever the next leader is going to be. It's not their party. They're just a member, just like you and I and the thousands of others that are out there. And I think we need to remember that we're there to try and deliver what they want us to deliver. And that's not, I don't think, been happening recently.
I'll chuck in a theme, David, at this point.
Yeah.
I run a small Facebook page. It's not popular, it's me doing my thing. But one of the phrases I use is first establish the facts, then ask the questions. And I want to draw you on the fact that you are trying to establish certain facts in relation to the NEC and a court case that presently is there, which from my reading of it is not against the SNP. No. It is actually to say, look, how did this all come about? And once we find out how it all came about and everyone knows how it came about, then maybe we can start addressing the issues that it's caused. Now, that seems to me to pervade an awful lot of Scottish political life at the moment. There's an awful lot of facts that need to be squeezed out if they're ever going to be seen. Can I draw you on how your case is going? Because for me, it's you and I agreed with certain characteristics we share. Me establishing facts is one of them. Because if I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, how the hell can I make a judgment on it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this goes back to sorry, my phone ringing. It goes back to the vote on the 30th of July, which was the NEC changing the rules for standing MPs. And obviously, it's no secret who my standing MP is. It's Joanna Cherry. And so I immediately drafted a letter and shared it quite widely. I had gone on, downloaded our constitution, pulled out the standing orders which govern the NEC and how it's meant to conduct its business. And it was quite clear to me that from what I was being told had happened, they didn't follow those rules. They had a completely new set of rules that they seemed to have agreed to behind closed doors. And so I thought that was wrong. I thought something has gone wrong here. So I wrote this pretty strong couple of page letter. And at the bottom I said, because at the time there was other people claiming they wanted to either leave the party or they were going to take legal action. And I thought, well, yeah, I agree with you. We need to get to the bottom of this. And also, if it's a mistake, then it can be fixed, and it can be fixed quite quickly. And if you remember, at the same time, I think there was a rule that was overturned immediately within 2 days for a standing MP in Glasgow. And that had been, it was going to be an all-women list or whatever, and that got overturned and changed immediately. And I thought, well, the same thing is going to happen to this. This is a mistake. Somebody somewhere, of course, the problem at the moment with the NEC is there is virtually no transparency. The only thing we know about is things that get leaked to us, usually through unionist press, which makes me wonder who's actually sending this. Who have we got on the NEC that knows the Daily Record and the Times?
There was one on Wings.
Well, okay. Well, Wings might not be quite the same, but yeah, certainly the only way we know anything is because somebody's leaked it to us. So the case, which is this, is not against the SNP at all. So despite what certain newspapers write in their headlines, which it sounds better, yes, I am an SNP activist. Yes, that's correct, I am. I'm an office bearer at my branch. I'm the secretary. Yes, I'm organizer again for the third year for our constituency association. I shared that first draft letter with about 18 to 20 branches, because they contacted me and asked for copies, and I sent it to them. And in that letter, I had copied and pasted, here are the standing orders of the NEC. Here's what it says it's meant to do. It's meant to operate very similar to conference. You vote for something, you nominate it, you second it, you want to amend it, you refer back, or direct negative. This is what's detailed in the standing orders. That's how it's meant to operate. And from what we were being told, and what has been leaked out of the NEC through these public leaks, is that's not what took place. It would appear. So I wanted a direct answer, and I wanted the issues fixed. And yes, many of the branches didn't want to go as far as threatening legal action. Well, sometimes that's the only thing that focuses people's minds, is knowing that there's going to be consequences if you try and ignore this. And I've heard through many people that they write emails or letters and they never get a reply. I've never really had that experience. I've only had to deal with the National Secretary once, as Secretary of the branch, and I did get a response quite quickly, and they did take action. And so I have to say, I've not had that experience until now. And when I shared this letter, many of the others didn't want to go as far as threatening legal action. And I thought, well, if you're breaking the rules, what are we left with? If your wall of silence, leaks in the press, we're not sure what's really happened. I have had answers, I have to say. I did get an answer. I got my first answer within 14 minutes of emailing the first threatening letter. Of course, it didn't tell me anything. I then wrote again. I got another response, which actually made things actually even more confused, because it seemed to contradict other things that had come out. So I also confirmed that the process had indeed been a voting system that I would argue is not constitutional and is not how the NEC is meant to operate. So that is basically being confirmed. And during that process, the issue of funds were raised with me, that there was some issue about funding. So I wanted to know, well, where's my money gone that I've given? In some cases, specifically for IndyRef. I've never had an answer. So it came to the point, I thought, well, I either give up, or I'm afraid I have to stand up for what I said were going to be the consequences all along. So that is what's happened. My understanding last week, there's been no answer yet. They have till the 30th of November to respond. I've made it quite clear, I think, I don't want to go down this route. And during all this process, that's how I came to the view that we needed to fix the rules, make them a bit tighter and a bit clearer. I've got a feeling, and it's only a feeling, that some people that were on that NEC had never bothered to read the standing orders of how they're meant to operate and were being guided by others.
How much will that come up for discussion at the conference that's to be held, David?
What do you mean, how much?
The formation of the NEC, who should be on it, etc.
Forgive
my ignorance, I don't know.
Oh, right. Well, of course. Then there's an internal voting process. It turns out, which is a bit of a surprise, because this is a new process. It's only just, I think, kicked in this year. So now nominees for national office bearers, such as myself, standing as National Secretary, you needed 100 members to nominate you for you to become a candidate. I had 108 before they opened their online voting system. And I can't thank everybody enough who came out and bothered to email me and gave me their membership number, which I took notes of and put them in a spreadsheet, and I sent a copy to HQ. There's issues there where I think, okay, COVID has changed things. However, we seem to have forgotten some of our bare basics, which is, what do you do for the members who don't have an email, don't have a computer? And in the old days, they went along to their branch meeting and they signed something and they gave you a note of their membership number saying, I want you to nominate. We seem to have forgotten that there are still people that are in that position. So I would ask people in the party to remember that if we're not going to have to be accused of being discriminatory against a certain segment of society, we should have these other options available. So the process is quite easy. It turns out they had apparently 72,000 nominations for what I think is about 200 positions in total against all the different committees that you can be selected for. That means on average, each person got 240 nominations, which is quite remarkable, I would have thought. And that also probably means that some people got many more than that, because the average is the average. So the NEC, if you want to be on the NEC, you need 20 nominations. If you want to be a national office bearer, you needed 100. So there's now an election process in place. It opens officially. I think it's as soon as conference opens, there'll be an online voting system, and you then rate your candidates 1 to how many candidates stand for the position. So I'm asking people to vote for me, number 1. I think the one thing that's different between me and at least 2 or 3 of the other candidates is my experience is based on coming from just being an activist, being a party member for 6 years. I've been branch secretary now over 5 years, just been elected for the 3rd time as the CA organizer. And I've been to, I think, every conference since I joined. By 2015, I think I went to all of them. And I have to say, it was a very exciting process to be part of. And I learned so much by going to fringe events, which I'm quite shallow sometimes. You know, I mean, if you've ever been to conference, you get all these fancy flyers handed to you, and you start looking at the lunchtime break, because it's only an hour and a half at the most. I learned, first time I missed out and starved. But the second time I went, it worked out. Aha, this is why everyone's so organized. They're going through the thing, oh, they've got tea and biscuits, or they've got sandwiches. Oh, we'll go to that then. Not interested in Forest Day myself, but oh, you get free food. I went to one, this will give you, it's quite a laugh really, but I was there with a local councillor, and we went through and we got this really fancy flyer. It looked like a strip of film, you know, and that caught my eye anyway. And it was called Rehab. And I automatically thought, oh, Tom Cruise and that, go out in rehab, you know, the film stars. And oh, that'll be interesting. Anyway, and there's food and wine and all that. Oh, definitely. Oh, I think we should go to this at lunchtime. So we went to this. It was absolutely nothing like I expected. And I came out with a bloody education. And I sat there and they were showing a 10-minute film. Yeah, you should get a glass of wine, but your snacks, sandwiches and stuff. And I'm sitting there. Anyway, it turned out what they meant by rehab was people who have had a stroke or have had a heart attack, or usually, I think it was mostly about stroke. And the difference between people that get rehabilitation, intensive rehabilitation, and it's not equally available everywhere else, it depended on your postcode area, and the results that if you got the rehab and the intensive rehabilitation, you made a much better recovery and your quality of life was much better. Versus if you didn't. Yes, they saved your life, because the NHS is very good at saving your life. Yeah, it's not so good at the other stuff, which is the follow-up. And so I sat through this, and they had a brain surgeon woman there. She was very bright, and she was pointing out, well, they can do all this. This makes a huge difference. And I came away from that thinking, so my frivolous decision to go to a thing called rehab, thinking, well, this would be interesting, was interesting. And I thought, Jesus, we've got to make sure that we make these systems connect, you know, so that there's a proper joined up. Now, that's what you get at conference. Conference, if you go to these things and you're lucky enough to go to these different fringe events, you can come away learning stuff that you had no idea about, not even that interested that much in certain areas. Anyway, I've been to so many things like that. Now, and I have to
let me chuck in a word from the 3 of us to Paul Kavanagh, wee Ginger Doug.
Oh yes.
And the
Indeed.
relevance of what you've just said, David.
Yeah.
All the very best, Paul, from all of us.
Totally agree. Absolutely.
Dave, you're biting your tongue up there. As I look at you, you're up there, above us all. Come back to some of your main points about what's going on in the SNP as far as you're concerned.
Well, my focus is, because I'm not actually really that bothered about what's going on. I know I have a pretty good idea, but my focus is to get our party back on track. We have a golden opportunity right now. One, we can fix the issues with the NEC. We can fix our governance issues. We can reconnect with our membership. I'll tell you one thing that really has surprised me since doing that farheadboy.com podcast is I've had several hundred emails from members, many of them telling me they were about to leave. And after listening to that, and I had several on the Saturday morning, the Sunday, again, the Monday after it went out, it was out on a Friday morning, telling me that they were about to cancel their membership. And they had decided, they'd listened to that and said, oh, finally, somebody expressing similar feelings that I've got, but as a positive. Because there's no point just coming on to things like this or on social media and just complaining.
Yep.
That doesn't fix anything, you know, and in fact, it runs the risk of damaging the party, which I definitely do not want to do. I want people to get behind some simple changes. Let's get back on track. Let's help the party get its membership back up to what it was, because I believe many have left. And many, I think, want to come back. They just need a good reason to come back. I think most of them, of course, were like me. They're yes people. They're people that were part of the yes movement, not necessarily dyed-in-the-wool SNP people. Ultimately, the more history you go through, because I hear people going on about the 79 group and, oh, this happened then. And I thought, I have no idea what you're talking about, because all I'm interested in is, right, let's fix this. How do we make this better in the future? You're quite right about asking questions. You need to get the answers so that you know what's taken place, you know what's happened. But what I've done, instead of just criticizing and saying, oh, well, this is not good enough and that they should be doing this, it suddenly dawned on me. And I'll tell you the one thing that stood out at me when I started reading the Constitution and what the National Secretary is meant to do. I thought, my God, the National Secretary's got far too much power. It's okay if you've got a good National Secretary, but if you've not, oh God, all sorts of terrible things could happen, you know.
That's good. One of the things that if information which has had consequences, which people question because they're biased, or just question just because they want to know the answer, if that remains hidden, that just creates more problems than actually. In life, you learn something. It's hard to learn, but if you make a mistake, you've got a choice: own up to it or try and hide it.
Yeah.
My experience is, because I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, is it's much better, as best you can, to make an apology and just be honest. And an awful lot of what's going on, it applies to the committee inquiry at the moment, where information is not being released. That just creates a suspicion that there is something to hide. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But if you keep hiding it, it just never comes out. And that is a bad position to be in.
I absolutely agree that, in fact, that something that happened, which I saw, and I got a couple of emails about the morning that our nomination system was closing. It was meant to close at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I got an email from a couple who aren't in my branch, but they had my email address. And they said, we tried to log in this morning at 6 o'clock this morning to update our nomination. And it was gone, it's closed. And then I heard from social media, people say, yeah, it happened to me last night at midnight. I mean, what the hell? And it basically created, as I posted out, it turns out that they closed it because everybody had passed the threshold. So they didn't put anything on the website to say that that's why it had been closed. So all this did was breed conspiracy theories that somebody's messing with the system, which is very unhelpful if you're trying to build confidence within the party for a process. So by some smart person said, oh, well, we've closed it, we'll just close it. Well, you should have just left it open. But even if they're all through, fine. Yes, but you've put a timetable, you've published the timetable. For goodness sake, keep to the timetable. Again, it's, sorry.
Even at that, it's still disenfranchising voters. I mean, if you put up an end time and somebody's late, then that's their own fault. But if you put up an end time and somebody actually goes in, then no matter what the result is, they've been disenfranchised if their vote's not counted. You can see what's happening in America just now. And at the end of the day, it's like people don't have a lot of confidence in things, and they don't have an awful lot of confidence in the people counting the votes in the SNP at the moment because of what happened with the NEC. And so, and these are people that have actually stayed in the party. I mean, as I say, when you said a second ago that about people who would go back to join the party, I would go back to join the party, and given certain circumstances, but those circumstances are only something that's going to get sorted out either in conference or in the NEC. As I say, there needs to be, for me, there needs to be a root and branch clear out the people behind the salmon thing, and that will come out in the inquiry, I believe, if they allow it to happen in the inquiry. But as I say, personally, I'm starting to think that they're going to need a judge to do it, because otherwise it's just it's something.
I think I take your point on this thing, the inquiry. Certainly, it's like everything. We need justice to be done, but we need to see it being done.
Yep.
You know, the one thing that I did last year, it's difficult to remember. There's that much been going on, but whenever it was that Joanna had headed that case against the UK government, I think it was last year. Anyway, I went to the Court of Sessions and I sat through most of it, and it was fascinating. It was a real education into our legal systems, the history of where it came from, Scots law versus the law of England and Wales. And one of the things that stood out to me, and it suddenly made so much sense, the Scottish system came from the Church of Scotland, where the parishioners had the power and gifted the power up the way. And in fact, the English system had started basically from the Catholic Church, which is the Pope at the top, appointing down the power. And in fact, the Church of England appears to have copied the same structure from the top down. Therefore, the two different legal systems was quite fascinating to get a history lesson in court. And I took lots of notes. I also loved the point that I knew a day before the results had come out, 2 days before the results came out, I knew myself that we had won, and the UK government had no case because of something that their council had said. And their council had argued, as they had throughout the whole case, that this was non-judicial and the courts had no right to get involved in this process. And I'm sitting there going, And then one of the judges, I think it was Lord Young, turns around and goes, yeah, and that's right. Their argument was, it is for Parliament to make these decisions, not for the courts. And I raised my eyebrow and I scribbled that down. I thought, yeah, but you've closed it. And exactly that point was made by this Lord Young. Goes, yes, but the Parliament is closed. And that's when I sort of smiled and thought, and that's the end of your case, because you're right. Parliament is what should be doing this, but you've closed it. Therefore, it can't do its function. So thanks very much for making the argument for us. And I was right. They were.
Slight tangent on that, David. The UK government at the moment has started looking at that. Should courts have a right to get involved? They're having a judicial review situation. Without going off at too much of a tangent, that's part of a petition I have running at the moment, where a particular clause calls on something for a judicial review. And the problem with that is it doesn't matter what the conclusion of whatever's being argued about is, whether it's right or whether it's left. A judicial review only refers to how it was done. Mm-hmm. So was it done properly by the person?
Legally, etc.
That's what comes into the Alex Salmond situation, which is very simple. His judicial review was, is this unfair? Is there bias? Is there something happened which shouldn't have happened? And he won on that basis. The problem when you start getting into the voting rights of everyone, do you have the right to vote? You start getting into is there a common law that says you have a right to vote? And I mean right to vote as a person. And the answer is no. The only way that comes about is through legislation. And when you start mucking about with legislation to do with judicial reviews, that's where we're heading with this. It's where people, when they say there could be an attack on the Scottish Parliament, that will come through something very, very similar. The ground's being laid for that.
Do you know, it's interesting you say that, because a year ago I was at a meeting with one of our Scottish Government ministers at a branch meeting, not my branch. And I asked this question, and I said, what's the plan if Boris gets his majority? So I think it was before the snap election, which I was predicting he was going to get a majority because the polling showed he was clearly well in the lead. Yes, I know we'll do well. I thought we'd get about 50 MPs. But if he gets a majority, it doesn't matter how many MPs we've got, we can't stop him doing whatever he wants. That's the whole point of their system down there. I said, so what's the plan if he gets a majority and he decides just to close the Scottish Parliament using maybe, I don't know, how little did I know what was coming? I says maybe a state of emergency or something, Brexit, but we know we're going to have COVID, because it was before that had come out. And what surprised me is it was clear that this hadn't been thought about at all. It had never come up. And the answer was, oh, that's not going to happen. Well, it's probably wise that you should, because if you knew anything about Boris's character, it was obvious to know he's not trustworthy. He's a bit of a clown. He's playing a part, basically. He's not a serious person. I was actually down in the House of Commons a year ago in the summer, the day that he became Prime Minister and made his first speech. I was sitting above him, 50 feet above him, because I got a special pass. And I couldn't believe it, because I'd booked it weeks in advance, didn't know he was going to be Prime Minister. It was just a trip to London for something else. Anyway, talk about timing. And I sat there for 3 hours watching him, listening to him, and looking at all the other MPs on the other side. I looked at Corbyn, who was basically a shadow of a person. I couldn't believe that he wasn't really engaged in the discussions at all. He was waiting to be prodded and a card to be put in his hand for him to get up and make his points, blah, 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 and sit back down again. And I thought, Jesus. But what I noticed about Boris is he was playing to his own crowd. He kept looking at them. He never answered any of the questions from the other side with any seriousness. And I just came away with the impression he just plays to the crowd. He's not a serious person, and you never get a proper answer out of him. So I thought then and he's going to be the leader. Oh, God. We are in trouble. And you're quite right. I mean, the internal market bill, its specific purpose is to strip all the powers away from the devolved administrations.
I get taught at a very early age to play chess. And that's how I watched these things going on. There's a building now in the centre of Edinburgh.
With a big Union flag on it.
Which is one of the pawns being put in place. You have discussions about whether the Competition and Markets Authority should now have a presence built up in Edinburgh.
Oh,
that's another pawn being put in place. Internal Markets Bill is one of the more important chess pieces. It's not a pawn. So it's probably a knight. It can probably move about. The moves are all there. And one of the things that Dave knows this, that I keep arguing about, is that I can't see. So we had a discussion with Craig Murray about this. I can't see, and I'll make a distinction here between SNP as a party and SNP as a government. As an SNP government, I can't see the preparation being done that leads to the day after independence, we being prepared enough. I've asked the question, who's the head of the civil service on day one of independence? There's various things you look at, and the thing that worries me is we're just not preparing. And I say that not to the party. The party commission, for instance, I spent Friday rereading the Growth Commission. Dave knows this, forgive me. He went off to have his wife's birthday. And I decided, okay, I'll take some time out. And I read the Growth Commission again. And if you read it, there's a whole bundle of paragraphs in which say, right, this is for discussion, it's for debate. It's to now allow the discussion to be taken forward. People will disagree. People will agree. There'll be bits and pieces in it. That's never happened.
Yeah.
And I just worry that we're not playing the games that we need to play. We're not wargaming. That's a simple way of putting it.
I think, and I've got no special insight into what the party's been doing or not doing, but it's pretty clear to me that we have an opportunity right now, and I think this is our last opportunity. This is our last opportunity. They're about to rip us. We're out of the EU. The shit is going to hit the fan, to use colourful metaphor, as of the 1st of January. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. I suppose a little bit of light, which might help us. And in fact, I was involved in an online talk this week, held by Irish TD, a member of the Irish Parliament. Joanna was a speaker at it, and so was Stephen Gethis, and some really interesting points. But two key points that came out of it for me. One, the Irish government will be the first to introduce Scotland for joining the EU, and that we have a lot of support across Europe, and Spain has no intention of getting involved in our decision. Now, and somebody questioned that, and it was pointed out, which I hadn't really thought about it yet. Yes, but the UK is no longer a member of the EU. We've left, so they don't have to look after their member state, you know. And so I think there's right now we've got an opportunity. We must, I think, work and doubly hard, get that legislation that's apparently sitting in draft form and get it in front of our Scottish government and turn it into an actual piece of legislation, so that we can hold our referendum.
Would this be the draft legislation that the Lord Advocate's Council in the Martin Keating's case said didn't exist?
Well, I've supported his case.
Me too.
If I can, I'm going to go in and sit in if they're going to actually hold it. I'd love to hear the arguments. I did read earlier in the year the legal opinion that they had to commission for that, and in fact I shared that with a certain MP. Turned out she'd already read it months before. So wait, why am I not surprised?
It's her former QC.
Is it? Right. So I certainly follow that with great interest. I happen to be of the opinion on that it would be better to have some form of legal, if you like, opinion actually come out of it. You know, so even if it went against us and said, "Oh, you've got to have it," well, that then allows you to focus your energies in a different direction and force them to deliver it.
Yeah.
Because it's not really democratic that you could have a party like the Conservatives who get very little support. Let's be honest here, very little support in Scotland. Their recent by-election in Edinburgh, their percentage dropped by 18%.
Yeah.
So I think I can predict one thing next year, and I could probably put money on it, and it's a safe bet. I'm going to bet that Douglas Ross is not the First Minister after the 5th of May.
I'll bet you something else. I bet he won't be leader past the summer.
Well, yes. Well,
Ruth Davidson's coming back as soon as she's ensconced in the House of Lords.
Can I pick up on that as a small theme?
Yeah.
If you, I'm going to ignore the SNP. You can read into what I'm about to say that I'm thinking of the SNP, but I'm not going to use it. Labour Party, who's the leader? Think Scotland. How many have we had? Think Westminster. What's happening down there at the moment? Liberal Party. What happened over leadership? How quickly they changed leadership. Conservative Party. How do they go about it, both in Scotland and elsewhere? Now, here's the sad bit of what I'm trying to get at. All three of those parties, in my opinion, will combine again. We will have another Better Together campaign. They'll throw everything. They will throw everything at us. And that's what I talk about in terms of preparation, is whether or not we are already sitting down saying, what's going to happen? How do we address it? And how do we make sure we've got all the answers we need already ready for every single activist to be aware of? I then come back to where I think we are at the moment, and we've got, because of frustration, we've got the ISP, we've got Action for Independence, you've got the arguments over how do you vote in the list, right? We are not preparing properly for what is ultimately one thing, which is this country's independence. We seem to go off at tangents. I keep coming back to the fact, and forgive me, I'm on a soapbox when I say this, it's not Boris that's stopping us becoming independent. It's people in Scotland not coming together. I know one thing for definite. If people in Scotland who are of a yes motivation were given the right to vote tomorrow, this country would be independent. I know that.
Do you know,
I tell you that. What's preventing that happening? And it's here in Scotland, and it makes me very, very angry.
Well, I think it's one of the reasons why I put my name forward to become the National Secretary. I want to focus and help focus our NEC instead of on some of the factional type things they've been clearly reported to be engaged in last year, which I think have been self-defeating and damaged not only the cause. I mean, when I hear that apparently there's not been a single mention of independence or campaigning in the last 12 months by the NEC, you think, but that's our sole purpose. Our sole purpose is to be focused on that. Instead, it looks like, whether it's true or not, I don't know. And in a way, it doesn't actually matter. It's one of the clauses that I put forward for transparency is to increase the quorum rule for the NEC to go from a third to a half, which means you are reducing the risk in the future of the NEC with just 14 people turning up for a meeting, holding that meeting because it's a quorum, and passing a vote on something. If we agree that, and if people accept that what I'm actually saying is if we said it was a half, it has to be a half, that's 21 people. Now, what that does, some people might think, well, what difference does that make? Well, it means you can't actually hold a meeting or pass any rules unless half of your members are in attendance.
Yep.
And that is much less likely to benefit any faction, doesn't matter if it's on the right or the left or whatever. So these simple things that can be easily put in place can help focus it. I think this is the last opportunity before the next election. Now, I know that political parties, SNP especially, want to talk about getting all their membership out there. Our danger is if we don't start listening to our membership, that they won't turn out for us.
No.
And if they don't,
you're not the only person that's standing for secretary. You've put forward, as I understand it, 4 fairly basic, not all that controversial suggestions.
You wouldn't think so.
Well, okay.
But they refuse to debate it.
have the other persons who are standing put forward suggestions for discussion?
I'm only aware of 2 others, and this is what I was going to raise it up because I don't want to get involved in any personal comments about any other candidates. I'm aware of one which is he's a current MSP, and he's produced a 10-page draft proposal. I've not offered any proposal. I've offered a pledge that this is what I will deliver. And I will have to work with the next NEC to deliver it, but I'm pretty certain there's lots of good people that are standing this time for the NEC, and many of them will succeed, I hope. And I would ask every delegate out there to think long and hard who you're voting for. What do they stand for? So yes, my 4 key points are, and it's not controversial, I don't think, I want transparency, I want to be held to account, and I want to see equality across the board, and I support IndyRef 2021. And if everybody else does the same, and that's the people we elect, then you can be damn sure we're going to be pretty focused on delivering exactly those 4 key things.
Does that come up for discussion in the conference?
Well, there's a flyer that goes out, and there's an electronic flyer this time, and I'm committed to that. I have spoken to some other people, and I think we're all agreed on similar things. There's a number I've seen have come up with exactly the same points. So who knows, we might all pull together for that to get that across. I mean, one of the things that came up, I had a conversation with someone the other day, and they were against the EU, right? Kept going on about, oh, well, you don't want to be in the EU. Well, I think that's a terrible idea, not being in the EU for a small country. It's done Ireland the world of good. Look how the EU, as the European Union, let's call it what it is. It's the European Union of 27 states that share some commonality. They agree to certain basic rules and regulations. They do not do what the United Kingdom does as a union, which is the big partner, overrules and bullies all the others and ignores whatever you vote for. No, that's not what they do. Now, and the EU is very simple. And the one this chap was going on, and he's a worldly, wise old chap, but his view of the EU was the total opposite of what mine is. Maybe it's a generation thing. I don't know. But I downloaded this, the EU directive, right? Your viewers at home will be able to see this. That EU directive, 2003/88, otherwise known as the Working Time Directive. The Working Time Directive that gave us all our workers' rights to 4-week holiday, limits on being forced to do overtime, maternity leave. But you know what? Just one country argued against it. Guess which country that was? The UK. The United Kingdom. Now, so the EU, there's two sides to the EU as far as I can see. Yes, it's good for big business because there's open borders, there's no tariffs, there's no taxes, it's all harmonized, same standards. That benefits business, good business hopefully benefits jobs. But then there's the other side of the EU with its social standards. It's human rights, it's the fact that we've got that directive which tells you've got a right to 4 weeks holiday, and you've got, non-discrimination, all that. We need to remember that has benefited us. I mean, they brought that in. I remember that being discussed back in the 1980s. So I remember the EU bringing that in. And they brought it in because truck drivers, in particular, were driving for very long hours and having accidents across Europe and killing people in cars because they fell asleep at the wheel, because they didn't back then have a tachometer, and they didn't have the rules that they could only drive for so many hours. Then they had to have a break, and because companies pushed them to keep driving more deliveries, and they did. And of course, we had these people's lives being put at risk. That's a classic example of the EU identifying a problem that affected all countries, including the UK, and bringing in rules and regulations. Okay, it adds a bit of cost to your business because you can only drive for 8 hours a day. You've got to have 8 hours sleep, etc. But these are sensible rules. Why wouldn't we want to be part of that? I think the UK Brexit is going to strip all those things away, and they're going to lower standards. Oh yes, it'll be good for business, for some businesses. It won't be very good for the people though. Yep.
I can't remember, David, who said this. I'm going to give it to Alan Bissett, but I could be wrong. That sometimes, like the 2014 referendum, if someone said no, they actually had to see the consequences of what that vote was. And that's why you're seeing people moving from no to yes. I think similar is going to happen with Brexit. I personally have a view that we should, it will be after independence that the discussion and the decision will be taken. Just a personal view. I have the feeling that a small step, that we might be more comfortable in EFTA, which does not exclude us going into the EU later. I'm not wanting to get into a discussion of that because I think it is for later. But I just think if we become too, how will I put this? If we become too fixed on choices that don't come till later and try and decide them now, it detracts. It's exactly what you're arguing about with what the NEC are doing. Are we having a hate crimes bill? Are we having a gender recognition bill? Sorry, could we please get back to the topic of getting the country independent, please?
And well, I think what's happened with Brexit, and in particular Boris, who clearly thought he was having had a marriage made in heaven with Trump. Well, do you know what? I watched that. One, I'm really pleased that Biden's in I didn't really know much about Biden. He's pretty much an invisible man. You know, he was always at the back of the room, I think. However, when I noticed him putting forward and selecting Harris as his running mate, I thought, oh, that's smart. Good. A woman of color, a smart woman. You know, she's been a prosecutor and a lawyer, and you know, she's come from a family of immigrants, etc. I thought, good. That is what I mean. I also think it's just great to see a woman of ability being given a chance to prove herself, and I think it was a stroke of genius to do that.
It's kind of funny at the moment if you look at what's going on in the USA and the continued support for Trump, because he has got a massive base.
I know,
70 million people voted for him. You can compare it to, I was listening to Peter Bell earlier on today, and he was going on about the poisonous union. Stop talking about independence, said Peter. Start talking about what's wrong with the union. The comparison is on the one word, immigration. We know that the Scottish economy needs an influx of people, younger people, skilled people, etc. Brexit denies us. If you wanted a reason for being independent and you chose one subject, it would be the subject of immigration, because it's quite clear that a considerable number of people in England, across all parties, wanted an end to immigration for the same reasons that Trump has a base in the United States. They've stolen our jobs. Our wages aren't as high. Scotland needs immigration. If there's one reason that ties back into what you're talking about with the EU and free movement of people.
Do you know what's interesting? I drafted a couple of years ago for our branch for a previous conference, and it was, I thought we should be public and upfront about having an immigration policy for the EU immigration policy for the party. And it got shouted down by people who said, oh no, people will think you're racist, etc., and you're bigoted, and it'll be turned on you. Well, absolutely not. What I was doing was copying line for line what the actual rules from the EU actually are, because that's not the rules that we imposed in the UK, but it is imposed in other countries. So the EU rules allow on immigration. So this idea of freedom of movement is for capital workers. It's not freedom of movement of people to go wherever the hell they like and live wherever they want. It's workers' rights, right? And the rules are, and it's up to each state to impose these rules if they want. The UK didn't do this, and that was the Labour Party. It was the Labour Party that was in power at the time. They chose not to impose any restrictions whatsoever, just leave it open. The income influx will benefit our economy. And it has benefited the economy. House prices are much higher than they used to be because of the pressure of people coming here and looking for somewhere to live. So if you own property and you rent it out, you're in the money. Yes, if you're trying to get your own house, you've got another problem. But the EU rules are really simple. You're allowed to go anywhere for 3 months. If you're a European citizen in any country, you can go to any other country for 3 months. After 3 months, if the country wants to, others do, but we don't, you have to register with your local authority, and you have to then be able to prove that you can support yourself and cover your medical requirements, such as insurance, or you've got a job, you're employing, you're paying taxes. That is what the EU rules are, right? The UK didn't impose them. Germany does. I believe Belgium does.
Yeah, Belgium does, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So all I wanted to do was to turn this into party policy, debate it at conference, and then get out there and tell people. Because see, when you start telling people who are against EU, against the single market and freedom of movement, you start telling them, this is what the rules would be. It's a fair policy. Everyone gets treated the same. All of a sudden, you start to hear people going, oh, well, if it was like that, that would be all right. It's the fact that we've just stayed silent on it. I think we're sometimes afraid to raise an issue in case somebody disagrees with us. But actually, staying silent sometimes is worse.
Let's invite in Mr. Llewellyn, who spent time in Belgium doing exactly that, and whose wife comes from Poland. Dave, your views?
For me, as I say, I was absolutely devastated by what happened in Brexit. I've got kids that live in Belgium who I will no longer be able to like just go and see, or who can't come here. I've got my wife's Polish. I've got a French-born son here. I've got a Belgian-born son here and a Scottish-born daughter. Like I've got a month to sort out all their papers through this foreigner registration scheme, and it's not bloody easy. I mean, I'm used to doing papers, but these are not easy. But basically, I would go straight back into the EU. I would go for EFTA as well, simply because at the end of the day, the EU needs to be reformed, not reformed. It needs to be reformed. There is a lot of stuff that needs to be changed, and I think one foot in each camp would be okay, at least until we have a policy on it, but it's not something we need to divide us before independence. The way everything goes just now, and David, I noticed that when you said earlier on your electronic flyer, somebody said, "Oh, I'm not voting for him. He's got IndyRef 2 is fourth on his thing," and I says, I believe it was just it wasn't in any specific order. I mean, it would be utterly ridiculous, to put all. But I think it was specifically because it's going for the NEC and transparency is really important. But it's that kind of.
There's a difference. There's a subtle difference between having 1, 2, 3, 4 and having first, second, third, and fourth, which is what the person actually had said. I see your IndyRef 2021 is the fourth on the list. It should be the first. And I thought, actually, I'm standing as National Secretary, and I can't deliver IndyRef 2021. Isn't the best will of the world. I can help, but I can't deliver it myself. So what I can do is deliver transparency, accountability, and equality, because that's key to the role you're playing. But yes, absolutely. I think I do think we need to have perhaps there's a second referendum down the road on what type of membership we want. But I tell you what, you can't change an organisation, whether it's the EU or anything else, if you're standing on the outside of it. So I would argue it's better to get in there. You'll get 11 seats, I think, 11 MEPs, I think, which is Scotland after independence, and those 11. Along with Ireland, you've got to remember we've got close relationships with a number of countries, France as well. So I think it works for other countries. I would like to see us rejoin immediately. And then by all means, let's have a referendum to see if we want to stay in it or something. Let's invite Nigel Farage up to tell us how stupid we've all been.
Oh, be careful. You know what Mr. Farage is up to now? Mr. Farage is running a finance guidance system.
Really?
Yes. Be aware of that's my background is finance. So I'm aware that he's now coming out telling you how to invest in gold and silver.
Oh, right. Yeah. I think I've seen those TV commercials. I don't think I'd buy those sovereigns if I was you. But
anyway. Mr. Llewellyn, I don't know how we're doing for time, but I'm conscious that there'll be things you maybe still want to raise.
I'd just like to point out a wee thing that's quite interesting when we're talking about racism. 6 months ago, I was accused by Humza Yousaf and Nicola Sturgeon in both parliaments and on TV and in every paper in the country being a racist because I went to a little demonstration down at the border about people bringing COVID over. And we were absolutely destroyed about it. And everybody said, they should shut the border. And he goes, we can't shut the border. We can't shut the border. It's reserved. And I said, yes, you can. The UK Coronavirus Bill 2020 says it can be done. And here are the articles in it that says not only can the Scottish Government do it, but so can the local health boards.
I was going to say the local authorities.
So basically they can do it as well under that same thing. And so the reason that the border wasn't shut 6 months ago was because there was not a political will because of the constitutional thing. And at the end of the day, at that time, we were getting no deaths every day. And now look where we are. And I think Nicola's done really well as far as managing COVID is concerned. But I believe, as far as she's acted as a great administrator, and I'm sorry, but as far as leadership's concerned, she should have been doing the same as New Zealand did. And now it's completely obvious that it could have been done. That's just my opinion.
I think it comes down to having the political will and maybe being prepared to take risks. And I think I heard someone being interviewed, and they were saying about what they thought the policy had been that our party's been engaged in, and that was, we didn't want to upset the apple cart too much. It's okay, eventually we'll get this Section 30. And you sit and think, well, actually, that would be fine if David Cameron was still in power. You probably would, if somebody was in there down south who abided by the rules. But I'm afraid they don't abide by the rules. The fact that they broke the law to close the Parliament, and they were found to have misled the Queen, etc., etc., that proved how, if you like, the risks they're prepared to take. And the same thing has happened more recently with the internal market bill. They clearly couldn't care what the rules are.
The words out of my mouth, David. Took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah.
So
they don't care what the rules are. Now, I think the problem we've got at the moment is Nicola, I think, had a plan, and that plan was based on the normal rules of engagement. Yes, but the rules have changed, and they've changed. Maybe it's a shock to people, but they'll not. I asked a year ago, what are you going to do if they close the Parliament? And it was quite obvious. It had never crossed anybody's mind. And I thought, well, I've never played chess myself, but I always try and put myself in the opposition's point of view. What would I do if I was them and I didn't care less about the consequences? What would happen? And so and to some people, it's unthinkable. Well, start thinking it, because it's not unthinkable. You're dealing with somebody who doesn't play by the rules.
3 years ago, on the 22nd of March, it was a Friday afternoon, we took 5,000 people outside Parliament at a thing called Hands Off Our Parliament, HOOP. It was set up by activists. It didn't cost a penny to put together. It was all done basically by people printing their own flyers and putting them out in the community. We pulled it over Scotland on a Friday afternoon, and we said that was going to happen then. And not at that, like, the politicians knew it was going to be happening, and Doug Chapman turned up, and Tommy Shepherd turned up and spoke to us. But as far as that, there wasn't a single MSP for inside that Parliament came out. And at the end of the day, 5,000 folks, a lot for a Friday afternoon. People who were concerned. And as I say, we're now 3 years down the road. We're now like 5 weeks away from getting ripped out of the European Union against our will. Thanks for all those conversations at Mr. Blackford, but I think we need a little bit more action and a little less rhetoric.
I do think that we're not the only people to feel this, you know, that I think we've got, perhaps it's because we've had too many snap elections dumped on us, which we weren't ready for, and we've dealt with what's in front of us rather than stick to our long-term plan. And I don't think it was really expected that Boris, I mean, remember when people said a couple of years ago, oh, we'll have Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. Oh, don't be stupid. Nobody would be stupid enough to vote for him. Well, look what's happened. Saying that, I think, like everything, there are consequences to actions. And I think the consequences to him being Prime Minister and to his internal market bill, I don't think they're sitting planning, oh, well, how is this going to go down? I don't think they care how it's going to go down. However, it may be that this is now the opportunity that we need the wake-up call. We needed to get focused. I attended the thing at the All Under One banner. I was dead against these marches at the beginning. I thought, I don't see what these things do. But I have been to the one in Edinburgh, and I went to the one in Stirling a year ago. And I get it now. It raises people's spirits. It gives some things for everyone to focus on. And I take my hat off to All Under One banner. They've managed to do one thing that I don't think any other Yes group has been able to do, which was to bring all different Yes groups together and focus on get out campaigning.
It's why I come back, David, to if there was a referendum today, despite all the arguments that go on within the Yes movement, which I think was out of frustration, sometimes it's ego. Yeah. If the Yes movement were asked to vote yes or no to independence today or tomorrow, I have no doubts about the result of that. But we've got to get to the point whereby one day, one way, the Yes movement are allowed to do that, and the sooner, the better.
I think I agree with you. I think this is about letting the people have their voice. You know, I think I've heard too many people say, oh, well, we can only do it if we know we're going to win. Well, how do you know you're going to win unless you ask the question? You'll never know you're going to win.
Ask Davidson.
Well, maybe. Yes. Well, the fact that they're so afraid of everything, you know. I mean, let's face it, the Scottish Conservatives are in dire mess. They just removed their leader and replaced him with somebody else. There wasn't a proper process followed. Their party conference they could probably hold in a small garage somewhere, you know, because they've got hardly any membership. So let's not beat ourselves up too much. We still are the biggest party by far, membership-wise. But we can now, I think it's now about getting focused. Let's get down to the work. Let's deliver it. Because our worst fear has just been realised. We are leaving the EU with no deal. We're going to lose jobs. I mean, I just love the fact that the farmers and the fishermen up in Scotland are bleating about what the Tories have done. I thought, well, if you voted for them, then actually I don't have much sympathy for you, because I worked out 4 years ago at another conference fringe event with farmers, and they all thought I was some idiot from the city because I made a bit of a joke when I asked, because one of the guys on the panel was, I think, the vice president of the National Union of Farmers or something. He had a dairy farm. He was dead against the EU subsidies. I remember his argument, dead against these. The farmers shouldn't have these subsidies. So I put my hand up. And they go, yes, this man at the front. I says, oh, I thought my food came from Asda. Oh, and they all laughed. And they all, I says, but your point about subsidies, the 20% subsidy, is that not being brought in so that our farmers produce the food that we actually need rather than the cash crops that they would do if we didn't have the subsidies? So we'd have lots of sugar beet one year and then no sugar beet, and then lots of carrots another year and then but no potatoes. And he sort of went, well, I suppose so. Ah, right. Mm-hmm. So you're against it. And of course, he was arguing that, of course, it stops us getting cheap imports. And I worked out then, 4 years ago, so wait a minute, Brexit means we're going to open our floodgates to non-regulated products from cheap markets that don't have proper standards, while at the same time, we'll be locked out of our biggest, closest market, 500,000 consumers on our doorstep. So we're going to have to sell our product, what, bloody New Zealand? How much is it going to cost to send our stuff there? Or I thought, this is nonsense. So we're going to have a double whammy. We're going to lose jobs. Farmers are going to go out of business.
Yep. And
we're going to end up with shelves. You know, I mean, I buy Orkney cheese, right? So I've got specific tastes. By the beginning of January, that will start becoming evident. February will be even more evident. Yeah. March, I don't know where the lorries are going to stretch from Dover to. That's why Dave wants to close the border, because we might have a traffic jam somewhere around Carlisle, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Listen, where are we in terms of time, Dave? I'm just conscious.
Well, basically, at the end of the day, I think if we don't let David go now, he's going to miss the first half of the Arsenal game, so we'll probably better draw.
Yeah, is it nearly 4 o'clock? Yeah, well,
no,
you better get your...
It's 20 to 4. You've got time to make a cup of coffee.
Fine, yeah.
But thanks very much for coming along, David. It's been educational. And as I say, although I can't vote for you myself, I know about 100 people who have rejoined the party so that they can.
And that is nice to hear, and I've heard that a couple of times, and I think that's, if I can achieve anything, if I can deliver the 4 simple things, and we get more members joining, and we re-engage, then job done.
I have a quick question, David. If you become National Secretary and I want to speak to you, will you speak to me?
Yes. Now, you didn't let me say what I'm definitely going to do. I mean, apart from a complaints procedure, which will be automated, so you'll get an automatic response and it'll have a reference number so that we can track these things. I also, as part of what I've asked to put in there is to put strict time limits for responses, for mainly complaints, I think, because I think that's what the majority of people are complaining about, is that they put something in and nothing ever happens and they never hear from it. So yes, and the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write to all the branch secretaries. And I think people need to remember, I'm a branch secretary. So I've been on the other side. And that's why a branch secretary becoming your national secretary knows what's important. So I will be responding, in fact, writing an update to all branch secretaries every month, telling them what's been taking place, dealing with any inquiries from branch secretaries that want to see the NEC minutes and votes and agendas, because that's the key that I think, a key to stop people worrying that things are happening without proper process, is to be transparent and show this is what's happening. Yep. And so they can hold their people to account. At the end of the day, that's what the NEC is meant to do. It's meant to represent the branches. Branches are meant to represent the membership. So that's what I'm going to deliver.
Thanks for your time, David.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks very much, David. I'll be looking forward to seeing you getting elected.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Hello, everyone. John Drummond here, host of the TNT Show every Wednesday at 7 p.m. We have another great guest coming up this week. You don't want to miss Suzanne McLaughlin. She'll be talking about journalism, about feminism, about standing as an SNP candidate, and much, much more besides. Join us, 7 p.m. Wednesday. See you then.
Never miss a live stream. The What's On guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
It's a song I wrote about 5 minutes ago called Carpe Diem, Hope Over Fear. Are you threatened by words from an empire of money and gold? Will you trade in your country's potential for the lies you've been sold? Are you scared that the walls are too high to be breached by the bold? Will you stand and be counted, or shut up and do what you're told? Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Let the TV man call you a nationalist for rejecting the lies. Are the wolves of the few off the bob, cause they wear shirts and ties? When they tell you that Scotland's no great, are you really surprised? Will you stand and be counted for something that money can't buy? Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Happy that nuclear weapons are dumped on the Clyde, fighting wars for the wealth of the few. How many have died? You can bury my bones, but the truth of it can't be denied. Will you stand and be counted? 'Cause I'll be there stood by your side. Hope over fear, don't be afraid. The Westminster Tories of Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Will the media tell you that England don't want you to go? And the taxpayer-funded MPs tell you just tell them no. No, but in Manchester, Nottingham, Sheffield, they already know that we're fighting for them, and it's only the start of the show. Ha ha! Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, my friend, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Vote yes for a future. Hope over fear.
It's the Brexit stuff for me, the nepotism stuff for me, breaking international law stuff for me, the ERG hijacking UK democracy stuff for me, education is a luxury stuff for me, £9,000 tuition a year stuff for me, it's the NHS on the table for a US trade deal stuff for me, demonising the working classes stuff for me, refusing starving children free school meals stuff for me, it's Boris calling Muslim women letterboxes stuff for me, his pickaninnies comments stuff for me, his bum boys comments stuff for me, his Scotland is a verminous race comments stuff for me, the UK internal market bill ripping up the devolution settlement stuff for me, devolved legislators being ignored during Brexit stuff for me, a lack of UK leadership during COVID stuff for me, nuclear weapons being in Scotland stuff for me, a decade of Tory governments Scotland didn't elect stuff for me, it's a weak left opposition in England stuff for me, attempting to frame independence as anti-English bigotry stuff for me, it's trying to ban anti-capitalist references in schools stuff for me, it's England-centric lefties painting SNP as a protest vote even though Scottish Labour is spineless stuff for me, it's the UK for me.